Continuing with beekeeping basics, this week, veteran beekeeper Glenn Anderson shows us some necessary equipment for beginning beekeepers. Bringing the people behind our food to life.
I think it is subjective as to what type of hive that someone begins with. I learned from somebody in his 70s who was getting out of the business. He had 2 colonies. And he had the standard Langstroth, which you see behind me here, whose design has not changed very much at all in more than 150 years. It's versatile. You can switch equipment between different colonies, and the honey production is very good with the Langstroth. The top bar hive is suitable for a home garden where they're not going to be moving the colony. They do get pretty heavy. The third variety that we're seeing a bit more of these days is the Waré hive, which is, maybe you could consider it somewhat of a combination between the standard Langstroth and the top bar. The standard setup when we're talking about Langstroth equipment is a bottom board, and this day and age I would recommend using a screened bottom board. You can see that this is made with 1/8 inch hardware cloth, and they originally were started to be used because of, or to help with varroa mite control. Just a certain percentage of the varroa mites that were on the bees themselves would fall off. And by using a screen bottom board, they fall to the bottom and then out of the colony. The added benefit is that this provides excellent ventilation. And that's what we want. So a standard bottom board, then that's a screen bottom board. And then generally in a standard setup, we would have 2 boxes this size, 2 deeps. That's just what they're called, deeps. And in each one of those is 10 frames. You can have a full plastic frame and foundation. Foundation is what we call that piece of material that's in the middle that is imprinted with a hexagon, so the bees can draw it out with their wax cells. And then there's also another way that you can go is a wood frame with either wax foundation, which was traditional, or plastic foundation, which this has. So behind all this wax is plastic. You can see that there, that's plastic. And is there a difference between these two? Well, actually you can get more production out of this, because if you put these together, you can see at the top that they actually can get another row or 2 of cells across there. But they do prefer wax. But if all they have is plastic, then they'll use it. I know it's a plastic, it's a petroleum product, but it's not one use. You can use these for years, and they can actually be cleaned up then too, whereas if you were using wax foundation and a mouse got into your colony and 8 holes in it, you just have to start over again. So from an economic standpoint, these are pretty good, and I find most beginners use them. And then a second one, because the queen needs that much space to raise young bees. On top of that is an inner cover of some sort, which fits on the top. And I have these holes drilled in mine, so a quart jar will fit in there upside down. So if I need to feed the bees in an emergency sugar syrup, it's very convenient to do that. And then a standard top. So standard equipment has to include what we call a bee tool or a hive tool. And the reason for that is that bees glue equipment together with propolis and wax and other equipment. And if you didn't have this, it would be virtually impossible to get some of the equipment off. You need this to pry open the inner cover, or to pry these apart, or to pull a frame out. And with this type of a tool, I'll show you the difference between the standard. This has this little lip on it, which allows you to go in and then you can pull a frame out individually. Bee brush, if you pull a frame out and you want the bees to get off, you can just brush the bees off. It's really, really soft. A scratcher. Oftentimes if you have a dead colony, which this one is here, this is brood that didn't hatch out, but I may want to pull one of those brood out to see what the condition of the brood is. That works pretty well, rather than trying to get in there with your hive tool, trying to get those out of there, which destroys the cells. So you can see how much cleaner it was there than trying to use this. Another piece of equipment that's kind of optional but is very handy is a frame holder. So say I'm checking these bees here, it's covered with bees, and I want to check another frame. What am I going to do with this? I'm going to just put it down on the grass. Now what if the queen's on there? She might crawl into the grass, and I don't know that. So that's why we use a frame holder. There's various types of these, but they hook onto the side of the brood box. Just put it there. Pretty handy. And then I can go in and check through my frames here. The last piece of equipment that's probably essential is a smoker. That's an iconic piece of equipment for beekeepers. You'll see that, wisp of smoke curling through the air from the smoker, and the beekeeper will give the bees a slight puff. And what the smoke does is, the reason that it makes it nice for beekeepers is that, for beginning beekeepers particularly, and commercial guys use it all the time, is that it drives the bees away from the smoke. It's not necessarily, well, they don't like it. And it's not because they think their colony is burning down and so they gorge themselves on honey and then leave. The action that I think is the best explanation for it is that it confuses their communication signals inside the colony, so they cannot communicate with each other. So that's one benefit of the smoke. I mean, that's the second benefit. The first benefit is that it just moves the bees away. If you want to work on the frame, you can give a puff of smoke and the bees leave that area. They'll go down in or they'll move out to the side. That's a good basic tool to have, and I would advise beginning beekeepers to have them. Equipment needed for a basic beginner would have to include protective clothing. And there's variations on this, but usually beginners will start with some type of a full body coverall type thing with veil. It's got an elastic band here, so it really holds on tight. And then gloves. Leather gloves with a canvas gauntlet. You would need, if you were going to go into the colonies, you would have to secure your pant legs at some point too, because they'll crawl up there. So that's basic equipment.